Blackwood estate shimmered under the summer sun like something out of a dream, or perhaps like a dream pretending not to be a nightmare. Ivory walls stretched high above manicured hedges trimmed with mathematical precision. A marble fountain murmured softly in the courtyard, its cherubs frozen mid-laughter, spraying arcs of water that caught the light like diamonds. Workers hurried across the vast green lawn, polishing silver trays, arranging orchids, and whispering into headsets as if the success of the entire world depended on the perfection of this one afternoon. By evening, the estate would host its legendary summer gala, an event whispered about by tabloids and envied by socialites. The guest list read like a roll call of power: CEOs, senators, movie stars. Every detail, from the imported roses to the monogrammed napkins, had been curated to uphold the illusion of flawlessness. And yet, amid the orchestra of preparation and pretense in a forgotten patch of shadow beneath a white linen garden table, a child wept. 6-year-old Oliver Blackwood pressed his small palms to his ears out of habit, though the gesture was meaningless. The world's noise had never reached him anyway. His face, streaked with tears, was turned toward the earth, his blonde curls matted with sweat and salt. His small body shook in silence, an island of grief no one could hear, even if they'd been listening. But no one was. A few meters away, Mrs. Peterson, the head housekeeper, barked orders into her earpiece. "We need more champagne flutes by the gazebo, and tell catering the canapes are to be plated, not passed." Her tone was sharp, clipped, commanding. She did not look toward the table. The nanny, Miss Thompson, had already tried coaxing Oliver out with a tray of ice cream earlier. He'd refused. "He just won't stop crying," she had sighed, straightening her skirt as if neatness might restore her authority. The boy's father, Richard Blackwood, was a world away, literally. In a glass tower in Tokyo, he was sealing a $23 billion merger that would redefine digital communication for the next decade. He'd left behind a wife, a mansion, and a son who could not speak his name. Richard's wife, Veronica, remained upstairs in the master suite, curtains drawn, claiming a headache. She was beautiful in a way that hurt to look at, her face a study in symmetry and calculation. On her vanity lay her phone, its screen lit with notifications. Blessed stepmom, family goals. To her 7 million followers, Veronica Blackwood was the epitome of compassion, a woman who radiated love and luxury in equal measure. Downstairs, her stepson sobbed himself hoarse. In the kitchen, Ellen Davis wiped down counters that were already spotless. The house was too clean, too quiet, too full of rules. Her daughter, Lucy, sat on a stool swinging her legs, a paperback book open in her lap. She was supposed to stay invisible. Ellen had made that clear. The rules of survival in houses like these were simple. Work hard, keep quiet, don't draw attention. But Lucy's eyes, large and curious, kept drifting toward the garden. Through the glass doors, she saw the boy under the table, his tiny shoulders trembling. No one noticed him anymore. To the staff, his crying had become background noise like the soft hum of the fountains or the distant chime of the clocks. Lucy tilted her head, studying him. There was something strange about the way he cried. Not loud, not wailing, just silent. A kind of crying that didn't reach the air, only the heart. A breeze swept through the garden, carrying the faintest scent of cut grass and expensive perfume. Somewhere in the distance, a violinist rehearsed for the evening performance. It was all so perfect, so carefully orchestrated. And yet, under that single table, the truth sat weeping into the grass. No one knew that the soundless sobs of one little boy would soon shake the very foundations of the mansion itself. The crying had stopped once or twice, only to start again. It came and went like the tide, except no one on the shore was paying attention. The mansion buzzed with activity, a hive preparing for the Queen's performance later that evening. The gardeners pruned the rose archways until their fingers fled. The chefs moved through the kitchen like soldiers in white armor, and Mrs. Peterson marched from room to room, her clipboard clutched like a weapon. "Table linens, cream, not ivory," she snapped, Mr. Blackwood prefers cream. And someone find Miss Thompson. Where in heaven's name is the nanny? The nanny, Miss Thompson, was kneeling under the tablecloth trying to coax a 6-year-old out from the shadows. Her voice was sweet but trembling slightly, the way adults' voices do when they're afraid of looking like failures. Come now, Oliver. Don't you want your iPad? Or your favorite cartoon? Look, I downloaded a new game for you. The little boy didn't look at her. His fingers clutched the grass so tightly that tiny green stains bloomed across his pale knuckles. He shook his head, eyes fixed on the ground. His lips moved soundlessly, forming words that never reached her ears. Miss Thompson sighed, rubbing her temples. He won't even look at me, Mrs. Peterson. I've tried everything. Maybe we should call Mrs. Blackwood. The older woman spun, lowering her voice. You know very well Mrs. Blackwood isn't to be disturbed while resting. She's resting every afternoon, the nanny muttered under her breath. It's a miracle she knows the child's name. Mrs. Peterson's glare silenced her instantly. That's enough. They stood there, 2 grown women towering over a small, trembling boy who lived in a world of endless silence. And yet, somehow, neither could truly see him. From the kitchen doorway, a young pair of eyes watched the scene unfold. Lucy Davis, barefoot and sunlit from standing near the window, had been pretending to read. But the moment she'd noticed the boy crying under the table, her book had slipped forgotten to the floor. Something inside her, a pull, a knowing, kept her gaze locked on him. His sadness wasn't like other children's tantrums. It wasn't the cry of wanting something. It was the cry of being lost, of not being understood. Her mother had warned her not to interfere. We're guests only in the way servants are guests, Ellen had said that morning. We're here to work, not to be noticed. But Lucy's heart didn't know how to stay quiet. When the nanny emerged from under the table again, defeated, Lucy took a hesitant step forward. Maybe he's scared, she said softly. The 2 women turned at once. Lucy, Ellen hissed from the kitchen doorway. Stay where you are. Mrs. Peterson's stern expression softened a little when she saw the small girl. It's all right, dear. But he can't hear you, he's deaf. Lucy nodded, stepping closer. I know. Her voice was barely louder than a whisper. I know, she repeated. But did anyone ask him what's wrong, in his language? Silence. The staff exchanged bewildered glances. Even Mrs. Peterson blinked, unsure whether to scold or listen. Lucy's small sneakers pressed into the wet grass as she crossed the distance between the doorway and the garden table. Under the white canopy, Oliver's tear-streaked face peeked out. His blue eyes flickered with confusion, then curiosity. Lucy crouched down, lowering herself to his level so that their eyes were equal. Then, slowly, she raised her hands. Her fingers began to move. They moved like they'd done it 1,000 times before, graceful, deliberate, sure. The motions were soft and rhythmic like the language of angels. Are you okay? She signed, each word flowing from one hand to the other. The air seemed to still. Mrs. Peterson gasped. Miss Thompson's mouth fell open. Even Ellen Davis froze in the doorway, her rag still clutched in her hand. Where did she learn that? The nanny whispered. Ellen's voice trembled. Her cousin's deaf. She learned to talk with him. Lucy waited patiently, her expression calm but kind. After a moment, Oliver blinked, his breathing slowing. His own hands, small, hesitant, rose into the light. His fingers twitched, uncertain, then began to respond. It was clumsy at first, like a bird relearning how to fly. But the meaning was clear. Lucy's eyes widened, then softened. Her lips curved into a gentle smile. She nodded encouragingly and signed back. To the others, it looked like a silent dance, a conversation of hands and hearts that transcended words. But beneath the beauty of it, something darker was beginning to stir. As the exchange continued, Lucy's face began to change. Her brow furrowed. Her smile faded. Concern crept in. Her movement slowed, uncertain. What's he saying? Mrs. Peterson asked, the authority in her voice giving way to worry. Lucy didn't answer right away. She signed another question, Then another. Oliver hesitated before responding, his hands trembling as if he were afraid to speak even this way. When Lucy finally looked up, her eyes glistened with something deeper than sadness. Fear. He says, she began, her small voice barely audible. His stepmother heard him crying last night. The garden fell silent. Mrs. Peterson frowned. Heard him? Well, of course she did. Lucy shook her head. No, he says, she heard him because he made noise. A breathless hush swept through the staff. He says she locked him in the closet. Lucy's voice cracked, her hands trembling mid-sign. In the dark all night. The color drained from Miss Thompson's face. Mrs. Peterson pressed a hand to her chest. Oliver, still crouched beneath the table, looked between them with tear-filled eyes, waiting, hoping that now someone would finally listen. But no one spoke. The truth had fallen into the air like a fragile glass ornament. And in the mansion built on silence and secrets, it was only a matter of time before it shattered. The garden felt heavier now. The kind of heavy that didn't come from the air but from the things left unsaid. For a long, fragile moment, nobody moved. The sound of the fountain's gentle trickle was the only thing that dared to exist. Lucy knelt beside Oliver, her knees pressing into the damp grass. Her small hands shook slightly as she signed again, asking him questions only he could answer. Each movement of her fingers drew another piece of the hidden story out from behind his frightened blue eyes. Oliver hesitated, glancing toward the tall windows of the mansion. His eyes darted between the glass and Lucy's face. Then he signed something quickly, urgently, his movements sharp, desperate. Lucy caught her breath. He says we have to be quiet, she whispered, her gaze flicking toward the house. He says she's upstairs and she doesn't like when people talk about her. Mrs. Peterson's expression hardened. This is nonsense. Mrs. Blackwood is a kind woman. She's just strict about discipline, but Lucy didn't stop. She kept signing, her small hands moving faster now, tears catching in her lashes. He says she doesn't want anyone to know, she murmured. That's why he hides. That's why he doesn't want to cry where people can see. Miss Thompson covered her mouth. Oh my God. He says, Lucy continued, voice trembling. He tried to tell his father once, but his stepmother told him if he did, he'd be sent away. That his dad didn't love him anymore. That he was too broken. The word broken hung in the air like smoke. Even the wind seemed to stop moving. The staff exchanged nervous glances. They had seen the bruises sometimes, faint and unexplained. They had heard him whimpering behind closed doors at night. But the Blackwood mansion thrived on silence, the kind that buys comfort and kills truth. Mrs. Peterson folded her arms, her denial cracking under the weight of her own unease. Children exaggerate, she muttered weakly. He's sensitive. He misunderstands things, Lucy turned to her. He doesn't misunderstand pain. Her voice, though small, carried the kind of quiet strength that made even adults hesitate. Oliver reached for Lucy's sleeve, tugging gently. His small hands moved again, slower this time, as though each sign cost him courage. Lucy's face paled as she watched. She blinked twice, her lips parting in disbelief. He says, she began softly. She pinches him here. She pointed to her shoulder, and sometimes on his arms. She says it doesn't count as hurting if it doesn't leave a mark. Miss Thompson stumbled backward. Oh, dear Lord. Mrs. Peterson shook her head, muttering no, 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 like a prayer she didn't believe. But deep down, she had seen the fear in that child before, the way he flinched when Veronica's heels clicked across the marble floor. She just hadn't wanted to see it. Lucy looked back at Oliver. He had stopped signing now, his eyes glassy, exhausted. He rubbed at his face with the back of his hand and hid behind the tablecloth again. Lucy turned to the adults, her voice trembling with anger. Why didn't anyone learn how to talk to him? No one answered. Ellen stepped forward from the kitchen doorway, her hands wringing the dish towel she'd been holding. She looked at her daughter, then at the terrified boy under the table. Lucy, she said softly, come away, sweetheart. But Lucy didn't move. He needs someone to listen, she said. If we stop now, no one ever will. And that was the moment Oliver reached out, literally. His small hand emerged from beneath the tablecloth, his fingers gripping Lucy's. It was such a small gesture, but it changed everything. For the first time, Lucy didn't just understand him. She felt his silence like an echo inside her chest. She squeezed his hand back gently, promising something wordless but powerful. I believe you. The clock inside the mansion chimed 3 times, the sound deep and resonant, bouncing off the marble and glass. The echo drifted through the garden, reminding everyone how close they were to the start of the party. Soon the estate would be filled with people, laughter, champagne, and lies. Miss Thompson straightened her uniform, her voice barely above a whisper. "We should call Mr. Blackwood. He has to know what's happening here." Mrs. Peterson hesitated. She'd served the family for 15 years. Her loyalty had always been her armor, but as she looked at Oliver's tear-streaked face, something cracked inside her that she hadn't realized was brittle. "I'll try to reach him," she said quietly, turning toward the house. "But if Mrs. Blackwood finds out," Lucy cut her off, "then she'll hurt him again." The blunt truth in that sentence froze them all. Just then, a soft sound came from the upper floor. A door closing, faint footsteps on marble, the click of expensive heels descending the staircase. Veronica Blackwood was awake. Ellen grabbed Lucy's hand. "Now!" she hissed, panic flashing in her eyes. But Lucy didn't move. Her gaze stayed locked on the boy under the table, his small hand still clutching hers. The air shifted. The mansion's perfect silence was breaking, thread by thread. Inside, the footsteps grew louder, closer, and somewhere in that stillness, Lucy made a decision she didn't fully understand yet, but that would soon unravel the entire Blackwood legacy. She leaned closer to Oliver and whispered, almost to herself, "Don't be afraid. I'll tell them everything." Oliver's eyes widened, not in fear but in something else, hope. Outside, the sun began to dip lower, staining the sky gold and crimson. The shadows of the mansion stretched long across the lawn, reaching for the children beneath the table as if to pull them into the darkness with it. And yet, for the first time, someone inside that house had dared to speak with the language of truth, the kind of truth that didn't need sound to be heard. The footsteps grew louder, sharp, measured, elegant. Each one landed like a countdown. The sound of Veronica Blackwood descending the grand staircase carried through the air like the ticking of a time bomb. The staff scattered instinctively, straightening napkins, fixing trays, pretending to be busy. Everyone knew that when she entered a room, you didn't breathe too loudly. Lucy froze where she knelt. Oliver gripped her sleeve tighter, his trembling fingers digging into the fabric. The boy's eyes filled with terror, not the fear of a child afraid of getting caught, but the deep, bone-level dread of someone who had learned pain has a voice, even in silence. And then she appeared. Veronica Blackwood stepped onto the terrace in a silk robe the color of moonlight. Her long blonde hair cascaded over one shoulder, her skin glowing with that effortless radiance reserved for those who never clean their own mirrors. In one hand she held a glass of white wine. In the other, her phone, its camera turned toward herself, recording a video. "Oh, what a beautiful day," she purred to her millions of followers, her voice dripping with warmth. "The garden's ready, the staff's been amazing, and my sweet stepson is just thrilled for Daddy's big party, aren't you, Ollie?" Her voice faltered as she scanned the lawn. The smile remained, but her eyes turned cold. "Where is he?" she asked sharply. Mrs. Peterson stepped forward, forcing politeness into her trembling voice. "He's right here, ma'am. We were just making sure he was all right." Veronica's smile returned, but it didn't touch her eyes. "All right?" she echoed. Why wouldn't he be all right? She crossed the grass gracefully, her silk robe whispering as it brushed against the manicured lawn. When she reached the table, she crouched down and lifted the corner of the tablecloth. There he was, her stepson, curled in the shadows, clutching the hand of the cleaner's daughter. Her expression didn't change, but something shifted in her gaze. It was like watching sunlight move across a blade. "Oliver," she said sweetly, "what are you doing under here, darling?" Her tone could have fooled anyone who hadn't seen what Lucy had just seen in his eyes. Oliver shrank back, his lip trembling. He didn't move. Veronica's fingers brushed his cheek, a tender gesture to the onlookers, but Lucy saw the truth. Her thumb pressed too firmly. Her hand lingered too long. It wasn't affection. It was a warning. "Come now," Veronica said softly. "You'll get your clothes dirty." "We don't want that, do we?" Lucy rose slowly, her small body tensing like a drawn bow. "He doesn't want to go," she said. The words hit the air like thunder. For a moment, no one breathed. Veronica turned her head, slowly, elegantly, as though she'd just realized a mosquito had spoken to her. "Excuse me?" Lucy didn't look away. "He doesn't want to go with you." Veronica smiled again, that polished social media smile. "Oh, sweetheart," she said, her tone sugar-coated poison. "You mustn't worry your little head about grown-up things. Oliver and I are just fine, aren't we, darling?" She looked down, expecting Oliver's silent nod. But the boy didn't move. His eyes were glassy with fear, and behind that fear something new was forming. Something small. Something brave. Lucy turned to him. Her hands began to move. The air seemed to freeze. The adult stood spellbound as the little girl's fingers danced with purpose, asking him the question she already knew the answer to. "Do you want to go with her?" Oliver shook his head. Veronica's smile cracked. Just a hairline fracture, but it was enough. "What are you doing?" She hissed, the sweetness melting from her tone. "Stop that ridiculous hand flapping." Lucy stood taller. "It's not ridiculous," she said. "It's how he talks. Maybe if someone cared enough to learn, he wouldn't have to hide under tables." A collective gasp escaped the staff. Ellen's heart stopped. "Lucy," she whispered harshly, gripping the edge of the doorway. But Lucy didn't back down. The innocence in her face had hardened into resolve. The little girl who'd been told to stay invisible was now brighter than the mansion itself. Veronica's expression turned to glass. Her manicured fingers tightened around her wine glass until it shattered. The stem snapped between her hands, and white wine spilled like tears onto the grass. The sound broke the silence. "Mrs. Peterson," Veronica said through a smile that no longer reached her eyes. "Kindly take the staff inside. I'll deal with this, misunderstanding myself." Her voice was soft, but the threat beneath it was unmistakable. Mrs. Peterson hesitated. Her instincts screamed to obey, but something in her chest stirred, something she hadn't felt in years. Guilt. She glanced at Lucy, then at Oliver, who was trembling so hard the tablecloth shook. "I'll stay," Mrs. Peterson said quietly. Veronica's eyes flicked toward her, sharp as glass. "That won't be necessary." But for once the older woman didn't move. Veronica straightened, her breath steady but her eyes blazing with restrained fury. "Very well," she said. "Then you can all witness how ungrateful my husband's child has become." She reached for Oliver's wrist. The boy flinched, but Lucy stepped between them. "Don't touch him," she said. For the briefest moment, the world seemed to stop. A servant's daughter standing between a billionaire's wife and her stepson. The sky darkened as the sun dipped behind the mansion's towers, throwing long, distorted shadows across the lawn. "Don't touch him," Lucy repeated, her voice breaking, but strong enough to make every adult there ashamed. Veronica's face twisted. For the first time, the cracks in her perfection were visible, not hairline fractures, but splintering fault lines of fury and fear. In that moment, the entire illusion of the Blackwood family began to crumble. And deep inside the mansion, the wind howled through the silver rooftop vents like a whisper of truth fighting to be heard. No one yet knew it, but by nightfall, the walls of that perfect house would bleed secrets and no amount of wealth. Denial or filters could stop it. The mansion slept in light. Crystal chandeliers shimmered against the white marble, and golden sunlight filtered through floor-to-ceiling windows, painting everything in expensive warmth. But in the heart of that light sat a woman who had built her life on shadows. Veronica Blackwood stared at her reflection in the dressing room mirror. The face staring back was perfect. Every eyelash was symmetrical, every curl fell with the right amount of disobedience. Her skin glowed with the faint sheen of wealth and curated serenity. It was a face that could silence a room or hypnotize it, and yet beneath the perfection a faint crack trembled at the corner of her eye. She leaned closer, touching the glass as if to erase it, but the crack wasn't in the mirror. It was inside her. Her fingers trembled as she picked up the brush from the vanity. She dragged it through her hair too fast, too hard. The bristles snagged. She didn't flinch. She didn't have to. Pain had long ago become a language she refused to understand. Downstairs she could still hear their voices, the whispering of staff, the small, sharp tone of that girl's defiance. That cleaner's daughter, the sound of her saying, "Don't touch him." It echoed like a slap. Veronica's smile in the mirror tightened. "Don't touch him," she whispered to her reflection, mocking the child's voice, as if he's hers to protect. She threw the brush onto the counter. It hit the marble and split. No one dared to enter the room. She reached for her phone and opened the front-facing camera. There she was again, the version of herself the world loved. She smiled for it, tilting her head slightly the way she'd practiced. "Family is everything," she murmured. Her voice was sweet honey laced with arsenic. She recorded the line twice, deleted one, saved the other. Then she looked up again. For the first time in months, she didn't see the graceful influencer who had conquered envy itself. She saw a stranger, a woman staring back with eyes too sharp, too alive, too dangerous. Her hand slipped. The phone fell, clattering to the floor. The screen cracked down the middle, splitting her digital smile in half. The door creaked open. "Ma'am?" Mrs. Peterson's voice was careful, soft, almost reverent. "The staff is asking about the dinner schedule. Mr. Blackwood just called. He wants to speak with you." Veronica turned slowly. "Did he?" she asked, voice syrup-sweet but trembling at the edges. "Wants to speak with me?" "Yes, ma'am," Veronica laughed, too loud, too brittle. "Oh, he remembers he has a wife, does he? How touching." She crossed the room, her silk robe whispering behind her. The scent of expensive perfume followed her like a weapon. Mrs. Peterson stepped back. "Ma'am, Save it," Veronica snapped. "And tell your little staff prodigy to keep her hands to herself." Mrs. Peterson blinked. "You mean Lucy?" Veronica's lips curled into a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Of course I mean Lucy, the mute's new little guardian angel." "Mrs. Blackwood," Mrs. Peterson said carefully. "The girl was only trying to help." The boy," Veronica hissed, stepping closer, "is my responsibility. Do you understand me? Mine. I am the one keeping this family's image intact. I am the one people see when they think Blackwood. Without me, Richard is just another aging man with too much money and not enough control." The older woman swallowed, the air thick with perfume and threat. "Now get out," Veronica whispered. Mrs. Peterson fled. When she was gone, Veronica stood perfectly still. The silence of the mansion folded around her like a cloak. She looked toward the far end of the room where a framed family photo sat on a table, the three of them smiling on the balcony of a Paris penthouse. Oliver's smile in that picture was genuine, bright. It was taken the first month she'd moved in. She remembered that day vividly. Richard had held his son on his lap, laughing while a photographer captured their picture for a magazine spread. She had smiled beside them, hand resting on the child's shoulder. He had leaned away from her. The photographer cropped it cleverly. No one ever noticed. No one ever noticed her. Her reflection stared back again from the mirror, mocking her. "You're jealous of a child," it seemed to whisper. She clenched her fists. "He ruined everything," she muttered. "He ruined me." Her gaze slid toward the corner of the vanity, where a small bottle of prescription pills sat half empty. The label was hers, though she'd long since stopped taking them. The doctor had called it situational anxiety. She called it control. Her phone buzzed, lighting up on the cracked floor. Richard Blackwood calling. She stared at the screen, her pulse hammering in her throat. Then she picked it up and answered. "Veronica," came his voice. Cool, detached, threaded with the sound of an airport terminal in the background. "I heard there was a scene. What happened?" Veronica smiled faintly, staring out the window at the glowing garden below. From her vantage point, she could see the staff moving about like ants, the tables set, the lanterns hung. Everything looked perfect again. Almost. "There was no scene," she said smoothly. "Just a misunderstanding. The boy is fine." "Good," Richard replied flatly. "You know how the press is. If anyone—" She cut him off. "Yes, Richard. I know exactly how the press is," he hesitated. "Tell Oliver I'll video call him tomorrow." Her laugh was cold. "He doesn't even like talking to you, remember?" Silence. Then the line went dead. Veronica lowered the phone. For a moment, she let her mask fall completely. The anger, the jealousy, the loneliness, all of it surged upward like a flood threatening to drown her. She pressed her palms flat against the vanity and whispered to herself, "They think I'm the villain. But I'm the one holding everything together." Then somewhere below a sound broke her trance. A laugh, light, innocent, and small. Lucy's. Veronica's head snapped toward the window. Down in the garden, Lucy was showing Oliver how to fold paper into a bird. The boy was smiling, a real, unguarded smile. It was the first time Veronica had seen him smile like that since his mother died. Her nails dug into the windowsill until the paint cracked. Her breath quickened. Something ancient and vicious unfurled inside her chest. An emotion she didn't have a word for, because it was the absence of everything she'd ever been taught to feel. "Enjoy it while it lasts," she whispered, "because when the sun goes down, I'll make sure no one believes you again." The sky outside turned a deep, blood-orange hue as the evening lights flickered on, and from her mirror's reflection, her own eyes stared back, not warm or human anymore, but hollow, glittering things that belonged to someone who had forgotten how to love and remembered only how to win. Music swelled through the evening air, violins twining with the hum of laughter and the clinking of crystal glasses. The Blackwood garden glowed beneath strings of golden lights, every leaf and petal sparkling as if wealth itself had a scent. Waiters floated through the crowd carrying trays of champagne and oysters, and the elite of the city gathered beneath the towering oaks like rare birds, glittering in their jewels and designer smiles. "Richard Blackwood really outdid himself this year," someone whispered. "Pity he's not even here to enjoy it," another replied. But the show had never been about Richard. It was about the image, the empire, the illusion that nothing in the Blackwood world ever cracked. From the balcony above, Veronica watched the crowd, her body framed by the soft shimmer of candlelight. Her silver gown clung to her like liquid moonlight. Every movement was slow, deliberate, hypnotic. The photographers adored her. Her followers would adore her even more when she posted the pictures later. "Smile, darling," she told herself softly, lips curling. "That's what they pay you for." Down below, Lucy lingered near the servants' entrance, clutching a folded napkin in her hands. The party dazzled her. The music, the perfume, the shimmering gowns, but she wasn't looking at any of that. She was looking for Oliver. He wasn't in his usual spot near the fountain, nor with the nanny or the staff. The longer she looked, the colder her chest became. She found Mrs. Peterson arranging flowers and tugged on her sleeve. "Where's Oliver?" Lucy asked quickly. The woman blinked. "He's supposed to be with Miss Thompson. Oh, heavens." "Don't tell me." Lucy didn't wait for her to finish. She took off running. Her small feet pattered over the marble steps and through the side door, vanishing into the echoing hallways of the mansion. Upstairs, the laughter from the garden faded into a ghostly murmur. The air was cooler still. Too still. The kind of stillness that made even walls hold their breath. "Oliver?" Lucy called softly. Her voice barely carried beyond the carpeted hall. No answer. "Oliver." A sound, faint, hollow, rhythmic, answered from the corridor ahead. Tap, tap, tap. It was coming from behind the door of the old storage room at the end of the hall. Lucy's heart hammered. She ran to the door and pressed her ear to it. "Oliver?" she whispered. The tapping stopped. Then a small muffled thud. "Oliver, it's me." "It's Lucy, are you there?" Her trembling hand found the doorknob, but it wouldn't turn. Locked. She banged her fist on it. "Oliver, it's okay. I'm here." There was a faint scraping sound inside, then a single tap. Soft, deliberate. One tap for yes. It was him, Lucy screamed. "Help, somebody help!" The music outside was too loud. No one heard her. Panic clawed up her throat. She looked around, grabbed a silver candlestick from a nearby table and slammed it against the doorknob again and again until the brass cracked. The door burst open with a violent creak. Inside, the smell of polish and old wood hit her like a wave. Oliver sat curled in the corner, his knees pulled to his chest, eyes wide with fear. The light from the hallway spilled across his tear-streaked face. He was clutching something in his hand, one of his stepmother's silk scarves crumpled and torn. "Lucy," he mouthed, the words silent but heavy. She dropped to her knees beside him and threw her arms around him. "It's okay. You're safe now." Footsteps echoed behind her, Mrs. Peterson followed by Miss Thompson, breathless, pale, and horrified. "My God," the nanny whispered. "She locked him in here again." Mrs. Peterson stared at the boy, her lips trembling. She said he fell asleep early. Lucy looked up, fury and disbelief blazing in her young eyes. She lied. Before anyone could respond, a new sound sliced through the silence, a scream. Not Lucy's, not Oliver's, a woman's. It came from outside, from the terrace. Mrs. Peterson spun toward the balcony doors, her voice cracking. "What now?" They rushed to the balcony. The party below had stopped. The music had died mid-note. Dozens of guests stood frozen, their gazes locked on a single scene unfolding in the middle of the glittering garden. Veronica Blackwood stood beside the fountain, shards of broken glass glittering at her feet. Her wineglass had shattered in her hand, and blood dripped down her wrist in thin crimson rivers. She didn't seem to notice. Her silver gown caught the light like a ghost's skin. Across from her, Ellen Davis stood trembling, her face pale but defiant. "She's a monster," Ellen shouted. "She locked that boy in a room." "Your son." Gasps rippled through the crowd like wind through leaves. Veronica's eyes burned, wild and cold all at once. "That woman is lying," she shrieked. "She's a jealous servant trying to ruin my husband's name." Ellen turned toward the guests, her voice shaking but firm. "You want proof?" And then, like divine timing, Lucy's voice rang out from the balcony above. "She's not lying." Every head turned upward. Lucy stood there, gripping Oliver's hand. His small fingers moved furiously, his signs sharp and desperate. Lucy translated in a trembling voice that carried through the stunned silence. "He says she hurts him when no one's looking. She locks him away. She says his daddy doesn't love him." A collective gasp tore through the party. Veronica's mask shattered completely. "Stop this," she screamed. "He's lying." But the boy wasn't done." His shaking hand signed faster. Tears streamed down his cheeks, glistening in the light. Lucy's voice broke as she repeated the last words. "He says," she said, "one day he'd disappear. Because no one would miss him." Veronica lunged forward, screaming his name, but two guests, horrified, grabbed her by the arms before she could reach the child. "Let me go," she shrieked, thrashing, her eyes blazing with hysteria. "He's mine." "He's my responsibility." But no one believed her anymore. Camera phones rose from the crowd. Murmurs turned to whispers, whispers to gasps, gasps to outrage. In a house built on silence, sound had finally returned. Lucy held Oliver close, whispering softly, "It's over now." For the first time in his life, Oliver looked up at the sea of faces and saw people who heard him, and above them all, the mansion's lights flickered, once, twice, before steadying again, as if the house itself had exhaled the truth it had been holding for far too long. Night had fallen over the Blackwood estate like a velvet curtain hiding the wreckage of a play that had finally gone off script. The music was gone. The guests had scattered. What remained was the echo of what they had witnessed. A house built on pride collapsing under the weight of a child's truth. Police lights flickered across the manicured hedges, staining the white marble steps in hues of red and blue. The air smelled of rain and roses, of wealth and ruin. Veronica Blackwood sat on the edge of the fountain, her silver gown soaked, mascara bleeding down her face like ink on glass. The woman who had once mastered every camera angle now stared blankly at the ground as a detective read her rights in a calm, unshakable voice. She didn't resist. She didn't cry. She just whispered, "He was supposed to love me too." Mrs. Peterson stood nearby, clutching her clipboard like a shield that had lost its purpose. Miss Thompson sobbed quietly, shaking her head again and again. Ellen Davis held her daughter close. Lucy's hair was tangled, her pink dress wrinkled, but her eyes were steady, the kind of eyes that had seen darkness and refused to look away. Oliver stood beside her, Bunny still clutched in his hand. He wasn't crying anymore. His hearing aid glinted beneath the flashing lights. For the first time in his young life, the world around him wasn't made of silence. It was listening. Reporters had begun to gather outside the iron gates. The whispers of scandal had already turned into headlines. "Billionaire's wife accused of child abuse." The mansion that hid the silence. Richard Blackwood's private jet landed 3 hours later. When he arrived, still in his tailored suit, his face was stone. He walked past the police, past the cameras, through the chaos of his ruined empire, and stopped when he saw his son. For a long moment, the two simply looked at each other. Oliver's small hands began to move hesitantly. His fingers shaped words the father could not understand. Lucy stepped forward. "He's saying," she translated softly, "why didn't you come home?" The question hit harder than any accusation. Richard's expression cracked. The man who had built empires suddenly looked small. He knelt, his voice breaking. "I thought giving you everything meant I was being a good father." Oliver shook his head. One sign, simple, heartbreaking love. Tears slid down Richard's cheeks. He pulled his son close, whispering a promise no contract could seal. Never again. Lucy turned to her mother. Ellen brushed a strand of hair from her daughter's forehead. "You did the right thing," she said, her voice trembling with pride. Lucy nodded, watching the flashing lights reflect in the fountain's water. "Someone had to listen," she whispered. Hours later, as the police cars drove away and the estate sank into silence once more, the first light of dawn crept across the lawn. The white mansion no longer looked majestic. It looked hollow, like a skeleton of everything it had pretended to be. Mrs. Peterson handed in her resignation that morning. Miss Thompson followed. Ellen and Lucy packed their few belongings, ready to return to their modest apartment. But before they could leave, Richard approached them. "Wait," he said, voice low. "You saved my son." He handed Ellen a folded envelope, a scholarship fund in Lucy's name. But it wasn't money that made Ellen's eyes fill with tears. It was gratitude, and the rare, genuine kind that can't be bought. Lucy crouched beside Oliver one last time. She signed "Be brave." He signed "Thank you." They smiled at each other, a silent promise that neither of them would ever be unheard again. As the sun rose fully, its light caught the broken shards of the fountain glass, scattering them across the grass like stars fallen from a sky that had finally cleared. The birds began to sing. For the first time, the Blackwood mansion wasn't echoing with silence. It was echoing with life. And somewhere deep in the quietest corner of the world, a little boy's tears turned into the sound of hope.